Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well. This is S.J. Thomason with Christian-apologist.com, Psalm 23 Apologetics. I am going to discuss today Juneteenth. I'm also going to talk about Joe Biden and the the Communion Initiative by some American bishops. And I'm going to talk a little bit about St. Peter and Christianity and how they all fit together, because they actually do fit together in pretty interesting ways. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy yourself. I hope this is finding you well. Right now is June 20th, and in the United States, maybe around the world, we're celebrating Father's Day. And so to all of you fathers out there, thank you so much for all that you do. You're very much needed in families. Families definitely need a dad, and great dads are sometimes hard to come by, but our greatest dad is our Father above, and he's the one that owes us nothing, because he's blessed us with so much, and he's a tremendous father. And so we can say thank you to him for all the wonderful things that he does. But going back to Juneteenth and exactly what this issue is. And some people think that I might toe the party line, meaning that I toe the Republican line or I might toe the Democrat line on either position on Juneteenth. But I don't necessarily toe any line on this. I'm an independent, and I believe that you should be an independent when you think about whether this makes sense. Juneteenth is a celebration of June 19th, which is yesterday, and it's the first national holiday that we've had. Biden is the one who decided to make this a national holiday, and the celebration is for the commemoration of June 19th, 1866, which is the point when the slaves in the United States were freed. And it's a wonderful time. And I believe that the holiday is well worth noting because it goes back to Judeo-Christian values. We, of course, value the idea of freedom and liberty, and we can go all the way back into our history and look at the Passover. And of course, the Passover was celebrating the Egyptians' freedom. The Israelites' freedom from Egypt, in ancient times. So the Passover is a commemoration of that. And so in Judeo-Christian history, we have a commemoration of the day that the Israelite slaves, were freed from Egypt. And of course, you remember that with Moses and parting the Red Sea, going out into the wilderness for 40 years before coming into Canaan, or the land of milk and honey. And so we remember that, and it's been commemorated for thousands of years. And so why shouldn't we also commemorate the emancipation of slaves here in the United States? Antebellum slavery was a travesty. It's probably one of the worst pockmarks we have in our history. And we're now celebrating the freedom of our fellow Americans. And we can give lots of thanks to that. And so I want to say hi to Hate Love Nothing. Say thank you so much for being here in the chat, Hate Love Nothing. I hope this finds you well. Virtual hug to you too. Always good to see you guys. And so anyway, I just wanted to say that I think we should, as Christians, I think we should all be in support of the idea. Just dropped something of the idea of Juneteenth. I think it's something that's well worth our time. Now, let me present why people are against it. Some people are saying, well, maybe we have too many national holidays, and each national holiday costs around somebody calculated $600 billion for a national holiday for the federal offices and other offices to close in the United States. And so that's a calculation. However, again, I feel that the particular holiday, the reasoning for the holiday, is well worth our while. And so some of our holidays are in commemoration of really good people or things. For example, Memorial Day is a day that we memorialize our U.S. soldiers, people who've served our country and done well for us. And I don't think that anyone would think that we should not pay attention to the great works that the people who freed us and given us the liberty to be here have done. And so the idea that we're celebrating the soldiers, and the idea that we celebrate Martin Luther King and some of his notable accomplishments prior to the time when he was unfortunately assassinated. I think that this idea that we celebrate Christopher Columbus for bravely traveling across the ocean with the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria to discover the United States, to discover America, first going into the islands, discovering places like St. Augustine. So we're commemorating that. And we're also commemorating Thanksgiving, when our pilgrims were in Plymouth Rock up in Massachusetts, commemorating that first year after a harsh winter of getting together and appreciating everything that we have in the Americas, in the United States of America. Of course, that was in commemoration before everything had come about. But anyway, so we are in appreciation in a lot of our holidays. And of course, I haven't even mentioned the most important Christian holidays, which of course include Good Friday, Easter, and Christmas. And so those are among three of the most wonderful holidays that we have in the United States. And so all of these holidays are important. And so the idea of celebrating Juneteenth, I think, is a very positive thing. And it comes in a month that's kind of boring. I mean, really, June? Sorry, it's a little dull in June. So it's not much going on. Might as well throw a nice national holiday in there, give people some time off to reflect and think about our history and how we got to where we are and how some of the great liberators of slavery have done that. So think about some of the wonderful people who were abolitionists in our past. We go back to Abraham Lincoln. In case you guys don't realize that, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. And he fought against Democrats who were very much pro-slavery in the 1800s. In fact, Democrats were the ones who were starting the KKK and fueling the KKK. Some people don't realize that. Democrats played that kind of an evil role, really. They were also the ones who fought against women's right to vote. Democrats did that. And then if we even look at the percentage of Democrats who voted against Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, unfortunately, the percentage is rather high relative to the percentage of Republicans who voted against that. I think it was 37 to 20%. So relatively high, but fortunately that act passed. And so people are given the freedom in the workplaces not to be discriminated against. And so I want to say that's pretty wonderful stuff. Now I'm going to shift over for a second to talk about Joe Biden and this little quandary that he is in. Now, Joe Biden is a professed Catholic, as many of you probably know. And sometimes we see Joe Biden at church and it looks like he is a person who believes in Christianity, celebrates Christianity, and understands the tenets of Christianity. Also probably understands the 10 commandments. The first one being love the Lord. You know, we boil these down to what Jesus said, love the Lord above all else and love your neighbors as yourselves. However, going back to the 10 commandments, there's one that's really specific about murder. And it says, thou shalt not murder. So why are the Catholic U.S. bishops against Joe Biden going and taking communion? Well, it's because a policy. Joe Biden believes in pro-choice. Joe Biden is for abortions. In other words, if babies are, the mother is unhappy with the baby inside of her, or the mother feels that the baby inside of her is inconvenient, which is the vast majority of cases. I mean, we're not talking about the 1% incest or rape. We're talking about the 99% of abortion cases here in the United States. We're talking about going back to Roe v. Wade. Since Roe v. Wade, 60 million people have been aborted, and many of them are people in our African community family, unfortunately. So going back to that, so Joe supports abortion rights and supports the idea of slaughtering the unborn, the innocent unborn. The most innocent among us, Joe Biden supports slaughtering them. Okay, and a lot of people are supporting slaughtering these babies. We're not talking about 7 weeks, 8 weeks. We're talking about at 16 weeks, 18 weeks, when you can see a fully formed human body inside an ultrasound. Okay, very clearly you can see arms, legs, hands, head, feet, everything else. You can see it all in an ultrasound around 16, 15 weeks. Okay, because I've seen it in my own son's ultrasound. Now, they told me that I could terminate the pregnancy. That's the exact wording they used if he were to be positive for Down syndrome, which he wasn't. So, of course, I wasn't going to terminate it no matter what, because I think that's disgusting. And I also saw a fully formed baby inside of me. And I thought, who would do that? Like pulling this baby out, cutting its limbs off, the things that they do to these babies is just downright egregious. And so the people who justify this kind of stuff, number one, they don't value our constitutional right to life. They don't. They believe that babies are not human life, even though science shows us that human life begins at conception. And so Joe Biden supports this idea of mutilating babies inside the womb, killing them. And whatever your political philosophy is, I'm going to be against whatever your view is if it's not anti-abortion, because I feel that abortion is a real tragedy that's occurred in the United States. And I think 100 years from now, people are going to look back on abortion and say, holy cow, how did we ever legalize this disgusting, disgusting procedure? That's what they're going to say. And they're going to look back on us kind of the way that we look back on people in the early 1800s and 1700s. And we say, holy cow, how did they ever legalize the disgusting idea of slavery? Okay. kind of similar. In both cases, they're reducing the value of the human life. They're pretending slaves were less than humans, lesser humans, and they pretend that the baby inside of you is a tissue, a clump of cells, anything to try to pretend that that baby is not a human life. Okay, and so that is the view, and so that is how some of this stuff fits together. But I want to go beyond that for a second, and I want to talk about St. Peter, because it actually fits in with St. Peter. One of the things that St. Peter did that I think is really great is, we remember, if you go back to St. Peter, you recall that Jesus told St. Peter, on this rock, I'm going to build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. Now, Jesus said that to St. Peter, standing on the rock that was sort of the headquarters for demonic activity. If you go back there, you realize the area he was in was the same area where he drove out the demonic pigs and did some other driving out of demonic spirits inside of people. In fact, there's a whole region that's close to where Judas Iscariot committed suicide. It's close to where we saw the demonic activities, pigs and those sort of things. It's also close to a lot of other activities that occurred in the New Testament that related to demons. And so Jesus said, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. So what happened next? Well, St. Peter, sadly enough, not too long after that, St. Peter denied Jesus times. Jesus was being marched over into the Jewish people's the Jewish people's place where they were going to judge him. He was judged by Caiaphas, the high priest. They asked him, "Are you the Son? Or, are you the Mighty One? Are you the glorified one?" They asked him something to that effect, and he said, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming in the clouds of heaven." Jesus, right there, in case your Muslim friends or your other friends who are Jehovah's Witnesses deny that Jesus claimed to be the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, he made it quite clear in that statement. And that is why the Pharisees ripped their clothes apart and demanded that he be executed and crucified. It was because they knew that that was a direct reference to Daniel 7. And they knew that the idea wasn't standing at the right hand of the Mighty One. It was sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One. Because if you're sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, you're making a claim to being equal to the Mighty One. And that's what Jesus was doing. So Jesus sat at the right hand of the Mighty One, coming in the clouds of heaven. So while this was going on, Peter was busy denying Jesus 3 times, and then he went out to hide with the other apostles. In fact, he was hiding with other male apostles. We assume some of the other 11 apostles. And he also was hiding away from some of the women who were around when Jesus was being crucified. And the Apostle John, the beloved apostle, he reported himself being present during Jesus's crucifixion. So we only had John and some women who were around during Jesus's crucifixion. The other apostles had gone into hiding. So why were they hiding? Well, they did not want to be crucified themselves. They didn't want to suffer Jesus's same fate. They thought that would be pretty awful. So then what happened? What's the next part of the story? Well, suddenly they say that they saw the risen Christ. First, he appeared to the women. Okay. We know from all 4 Gospels that he appeared to women who were, according to Josephus, who is a Jewish historian, women were not to be credible witnesses. They weren't to be trusted necessarily. So who does Jesus appear to first? Well, that rebel appeared to women. He appeared to Mary Magdalene and then to the other women. And he appeared to Peter individually. Okay, that's reported in Luke, and it's also reported in 1 Corinthians 15. And then he appeared to the 12. Okay, he appeared to them. And someone might say, the 12, well, Judas Iscariot. Well, yeah, but we had Matthias. Matthias had been ordained as a member of the 12. In the first part of Acts, we see that. Matthias was the one who drew the larger straw and was given the opportunity to serve as one of the 12. Okay, so he appeared to the 12. And then he appeared to Jesus's half-brother, James. Okay, so James had also denied Jesus. James and his family had tried to stop Jesus's ministry, thinking he was acting a little bit nutty. They didn't know what he was doing. They thought it was very strange that he was out there proclaiming to be what he was doing. He was doing miracles. He was doing all sorts of things. He had drummed up quite a following, and he was making a big shake. He was shaking up things the way they were then. Okay, so going back to history and how awful it was back then, people were really not given the human rights that we've come to appreciate, and sometimes in some cases come to not even really appreciate the fact of its source. But going back, so anyway, so then Jesus appeared to James. Then he appeared to 500 people that Paul said some were asleep, some had fallen asleep, meaning that some had passed away between the time that this had happened and the time that he was writing 1 Corinthians 15, which was a creed that a lot of ancient people who are ancient scholars or scholars of ancient scholars should have said that this ancient creed was memorized probably within 3 or 5 years of Jesus' resurrection, which we can estimate is around 33 AD. And so he appeared to them, and then he appeared to Paul, the one abnormally born. That's what Paul said, because Paul was the one who was out there as Saul, saying all kinds of really mean things about Christians on his way to Damascus, when he suddenly saw this light in the sky. And he heard the words, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And Saul said, "Who are you, Lord?" "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." And so Jesus gave Paul instructions, and Paul came to learn that he had God had a lot of plans for Paul. Paul ended up writing more books of the New Testament than any other disciple. He was arguably one of Jesus' most arduous disciples, one of his most persistent. Paul worshiped and practiced and preached for Jesus for decades, despite being thrown in prison a number of times, being beaten, whipped, and having all sorts of other awful outcomes. But that brings us back to Peter. So what happened to Peter? So he denies Jesus 3 times. He sees Jesus. And suddenly Peter comes out and starts preaching for Jesus. And he stands up and he starts saying things in the book of Acts. He says things to the other apostles and to other people who are listening. And in some cases, they were speaking the mother tongue of people in other languages because they had been given that ability to speak other people's languages, which was really baffling people. They couldn't believe this amazing thing. And so then Peter did that, and he was very brave, and he just kept preaching. They told him to stop. They could stop preaching, stop preaching. Peter would not stop. He insisted on keeping preaching. And he preached for decades until he was crucified, probably upside. So that we had that with Peter. Same thing with Paul. Paul preached for decades. Despite all of these terrible persecutions, both were thrown in prison, both were beaten, all sorts of bad things had happened to both of them. But they refused to recant or change their minds about what they were saying because they knew what they were preaching was the truth. They were uniquely positioned to know the truth of what they said. Okay, they had seen the risen Christ. That's the amazing thing that we can all appreciate. So then what happened? So then they were crucified. We have Paul, who was beheaded, unfortunately. But what was interesting about Paul is that Paul was a Pharisee. And Gamaliel, who was also a Pharisee, was the one who had treated Paul and trained Paul. And Gamaliel was the one who stood up to the other Pharisees when Peter had been arrested with another disciple. And Gamaliel said, "Listen, others have gone forward to claim that they were the Messiah. We have Theudas, we have Judas of Galilee, we have all of these others who claim that they were the Messiah." Because you see, you have to remember something. The Jews were expecting the Messiah to show up at this point. We can see that's already recorded in the Sanhedrin. If you haven't read it, go to 97 and 98. You can find it online in Sephora. Okay, so you can see the Sanhedrin, see what they believed. They believed that there were 2 types of Messiah. There was one that was lowly and riding on a donkey, as reported in Zechariah 9:9, and there was one who was going to be glorious coming in the clouds of heaven, as reported in Daniel 7. And so we saw that the Messiah came to us because the Jewish people were deserving of this type of Messiah, according to the Sanhedrin. He came to us humble and lowly. So what Gamaliel said, he said, we were expecting a Messiah. Theudas, he had a bunch of people who followed him, but then he died and they all scattered. Same thing with Judas the Galilean. He had a bunch of people follow him and then they all scattered after he died. But he said, listen, if these men are of God, you won't be able to stop them. But if they're of man, their stuff will be diluted, just like it happened with the other 2. And so he pointed that out, and he saved Jesus. He saved Peter and the other disciples' lives at that particular point, and he let them go on. And so they ended up going into prison. They got out of prison. They ended up going and preaching in the temple without any fear. They didn't stop. And guess what happened? Neither did Christianity. From its very humble roots, in an obscure point in ancient Near East, suddenly Christianity comes to be worshipped by between 5 and 6 million people, according to historians like Jeffrey Wavro and others who wrote the Historical Atlas. Okay, I've got the book right in front of me, actually. I'm looking right at it. So the Historical Atlas got about 40 different secular authors, different universities around the world. They say that up until 313, when Constantine finally legalized Christianity, between 5 and 6 million adherents were following it. I think Gamaliel was right, because God is behind that. And God is behind Christianity. And Christianity has really changed the world for the better. In case you guys don't know, Christianity has done a lot for the United States. It's done a lot for the rest of the world. It's done a lot for the West. It's given us this idea of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. All individuals are equally of value. All individuals are entitled to equal opportunities. All individuals should be treated equally in the court system. These are Christian values, and these aren't something that you had in the ancient times. One of the things that the author of Dominion, who's an agnostic called Tom Holland, who now says he identifies happily as a Christian, one of the things he found that people in ancient times were really awful to each other. They were leaving women out to starve, little baby women, who they just let them out to starve because they couldn't take care of them. If kids, they considered the kids had some sort of a deformity or some sort of an issue. They were mentally or physically handicapped or something like that. They would simply kill them. That's how they treated people back then. And of course, if you were a king or you were someone of a high level or a high status, you were given a much better deal when you committed a crime than people of lower status. That's all recorded in places like the Code of Hammurabi. Okay, so we know that people were given unequal privileges. We also know, going back to Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, that the idea that slaves were lesser humans quite prevalent. But that was all changed in Galatians, wasn't it? Neither slave nor Greek nor Jew, nor free, nor whatever. We're all one in the eyes of the Lord. We're all one in the body of Christ. And so I'm looking right now. I see a few people in the chat. I want to say hi to you guys. Jesus is Lord. Hate, love, nothing. Plastic Jesus. We got an interesting little crew there in the chat. So if unborn children aren't here now, then what exactly are they aborting? So yeah, they're aborting children. That's the problem. If you guys can only imagine, one of the things that's become notable for people is a lot of people had been worrying about a population. Our population is going to get so large that we're going to take away all of the resources on the planet. So the population is going to get so large that our resources, our natural resources, are going to be depleted, and we're going to have a lot of problems with that. However, researchers have found not necessarily. Let's step back there a little bit. So think about this. We have 7 billion people currently on the planet. A lot of people, especially in Western and more modern economies, are aging, and they aren't replacing their kids at people levels. So for example, a couple comes together, replacement levels would be about having 2 kids, okay? Having 2 kids, you're replacing, because you're 2, you have 2. And they actually say 2.1 because they realize that some kids might die early on. And so replacement levels is 2.1%, that's the replacement level in the population. But we're finding what's going on in some European countries, and of course China and other places like that, is they aren't replacing their people. So what's happening is, in fact, in China, they used to have a one-child law, but they've repealed that because they came to realize that these younger people have to take care of the older people. And if they don't have the younger people, people are going to have problems when they get older, when this younger people cannot support them. Same in the United States. We need the younger people to pay into Social Security Ponzi scheme, okay? So if we don't have the younger people paying into the Social Security Ponzi scheme, we're not going to have a Social Security to collect from as we get older. And so that's something that's actually required. We actually really need that. And so we should encourage bigger families. It might sound counterintuitive, but it's actually a better thing. If you have larger families, there's a better chance that you're going to have people who are able to figure out ways to give back to the world. More scientists, more thinkers, more educated people. You can put them through schools, and they're going to come up with ideas and ways to deal with some of the climate issues that we're having today, for example. And so that's one of the things. So yeah, 3-child policy in China, they're actually realizing that, wait a second, we were in a bad deal. So when they had the 1-child policy, just to note something, is they at one point had 5 million extra males than females. And you say to yourself, what happened to the females? Why were the females not there? Well, a lot of females were given up for adoptions, and some were simply aborted. Okay, so it's really tragic to be a female because they thought that if they're only allowed to have one child, they wanted to have one who was likely to be a breadwinner and a supporter for them. And that was a more likely thing to be male. And so that's something that the Chinese government was advocating. And so, yeah, so thank you, Sal. I want to say hi. I can open this up if anybody's interested in coming in here. I'd love to invite some people into the conversation. And so, in fact, I'm going to put a link here in case anybody decides they want to join me. I don't have a huge amount of time. I decided I'll take my son to basketball practice tonight. Wait, there we go. There's the link. So I decided I'll take my son to basketball practice tonight to help my husband out. Unfortunately, he threw out his back in a really horrible way. And so he's been kind of hobbling around and not having a very good time. And right now he's watching the US Open, having a really good time, sitting there, relaxing, watching the US Open. And so I thought it'd be a good time to make a video because I haven't made one in a while. And so I thought I better jump back into this for a few minutes. But anyway, going back to a couple of other topics that I think that we're talking about. So the idea that we want to make sure that we have a country where people are equally valued, people are rewarded for their contributions. I think that's all important. And I think that we can all get together and join that. So great. Yeah, great. I'm going to have Sal here in a few minutes. So that's fantastic. Good. So if I knew Sal, if I knew your Twitter address, I would have tweeted you about this because I did tweet a few people. And I just said, I'm thinking of going on there today. If you guys want to join me, I've got a private Twitter account. I haven't gone public with my Twitter account. I closed my very public one that I had back in January. It was a good move on my part, I believe, because I've had much more peace now in this little protected account. So, and peace is good. And so I also wanted to talk about a few other things that I've been thinking about. And so one of the other things that I've been thinking about is I've noticed a lot of people who are very much sort of anti-theist, anti-Christian, and they spend a lot of time, really just hours and hours and hours of time on Twitter and on YouTube and Instagram and in other places talking about how God isn't real. And it makes me think to myself now, if I really didn't believe in God, like I truly didn't believe in God, didn't think that God was real, I certainly would not spend very much time talking about it because I feel like I don't have much time left on this planet. I need to be using it in better ways, like going to Busch Gardens or going to Disney World or doing something productive for my day, maybe writing a book or doing something like that, but certainly not trolling around on Twitter trying to put little ideas into people's heads about God not existing, when of course we have lots of evidence that he does. And so, yeah, St. Tommy, I want to point out, hold on. First, I want to point out, we're definitely be seeing our friend here, Sal. St. Tommy, he says, never forget, the Lord Jesus Christ was crucified, buried, and rose from the dead on the third day for the forgiveness of sin, the gospel of grace. Amen, Saint. And you know what? I had I just want to mention at our church today, the person who stood up, he's not a full-time pastor. I guess he's a part-time pastor, but he stood up and he was talking about his amazing sister. And this ties into what I was just talking about. So it's kind of cool. So he was saying that he was just talking about what an amazing sister he has and how she's beautiful and all this kind of stuff. And then he put her on the screen and she was a woman with Down syndrome. And she was just talking about how her family referred to her extra chromosome as a love chromosome. And that she was just full of love and full of life and just so happy to be here. And she just seemed like such a wonderful person, so beautiful. And that goes back to what I was getting at the beginning when I said some people have, especially in places like Iceland, they've decided that they can eliminate Down syndrome altogether by aborting any babies who show the symptoms of Down syndrome in the womb. And I think that's a real tragedy because you're eliminating this wonderful portion of our population. And if you saw this woman on camera and you listen to her words, she just is a tremendously beautiful, happy, well-balanced individual who's probably brought an amazing amount of love into the lives of her family. And so I think that kind of thing should be revered. And I think that people should be really happy and appreciative when you're given a child, no matter what the condition of the child is. Sometimes a child might have certain issues. I've got a family member who does have an issue that she was born with relatively recently. And in my family, in my initial family. And so I can just say that I know that people are given these challenges, but you know what? They're going to rise up and become probably be better in the world for it, giving back in a better way. And so I can say that this woman certainly is doing the same thing, and she's giving back in her positive ways. And the speech that she gave to our church really just kind of brought tears to everyone's eyes, because it was just such a beautiful story. And you can say, wow, these kind of people are out there just making a difference. And when the world needs hope, as we do, we all need hope. And you see people like that, and you realize, geez, all the gifts that I've been given, and maybe you're given health. Maybe you don't have pain. You don't have some of the problems that some of these other people in the world have gone through. And then you see the people who have some of these issues, some of these challenges, and you see how strong they are, and you realize, gee, I'm kind of a schmuck. And when I realize I'm not going through those kind of situations. My kids don't have those sort of situations. I don't have that particular challenge. We don't have Down syndrome in our family, but yet I see people who are going through those kind of challenges, and I realize that they're stronger people than we are, and God put them here for good reason. Awesome. Here's my good friend Sal. How are you, Sal?
I'm hanging in there. Praise God. Praise God. I always look forward to all of your shows. It's always interesting, and it takes angles that no one else does. So your show on the what I call the singularitarians, and I don't know what I have my name for it, but that one where you got the scholar that was studying like the cyborg thing, that was very, I'm just like,
oh
no
yeah,
one covers stuff like that. And then your analysis of economics,
I think it was
history.
Oh, thank you.
Like, these are angles of apologetics and the Christian faith that no one engages in. And what ends up happening is sometimes the Christian culture is just kind of blindsided by things that they don't expect. You know? So I just wanted to, yeah. I don't know if you knew, but my mother passed away 7 weeks ago. And so that's why you see me in a different
that. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So, but I just wanted to say your channel's been a great encouragement to me, and always so informative, some of the things that you cover. So I don't think I have much to add today. YouTube just kind of alerted me to this stream like maybe 20 minutes after it started. Had I known, I would have hopped right on.
Oh, I'm really glad you're here, actually. And your perspective, see, what I like about your perspective is you have knowledge about things that I have no clue about. So, which you get into really good detail in the scientific world, and you've got a lot of information that people really need to know, that I have to be honest, that's not my specialization at all. And so I hear my dog. That's not my specialization at all. So when I hear somebody else who's so eloquent about that, I'm very appreciative. So thank you for all you do.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, there's my camera's a bit tilted. I have to figure out how to untilt it. So, there it's. Apologies to all the viewers trying to get.
Oh, no worries. Let me ask you this, Sal. So have you? And I'm sorry to hear about your mom. I can say though that we both know that she's in a very good place right now, probably just in the arms of a very much loving Jesus. And so I'm sure of that. And so, yeah, praise the Lord. Absolutely. And Sal, maybe one of the things that would be really cool is, and I think that some of the people listening now, or maybe to listen tomorrow, whenever people listen to this video, it would be really neat if you had shared a little miracle that you had, or I think it was with your mom, or at least with a family member a while ago. And so I was just wondering if you would share that again, because other people might not have heard it. And I think these days people need encouragement.
There's miracles of providence. What I mean by that is the mechanism may have been totally naturalistic, but it just happens after you pray. So that's just kind of a precursor to my description of this. So like, let's say your tire blows out and then you're praying, oh Lord, help, send a state trooper. And then he arrives right at that moment. It's not like God just made him magically appear. He was ordaining this even before you prayed that prayer. He had foreseen it, and he's making providence. And um, I would at least put that in the category of providence for my mom. And now, even looking in retrospect, now that she's passed away, I feel the Lord was kind of just giving me a little more time to say my goodbyes and to have a chance to say, sorry, Mom, for how I've messed up as a son. And because for someone to go to their grave and you feel that you wish you could have said you're sorry, and you didn't have to, that's tough. So in 2018, she had an undiagnosed urinary tract infection. And still to this day, we're not 100% sure that was necessarily the major cause. She lost her ability to read, write, talk, walk. She lost her appetite. And she'd been seeing the doctor on and off. And, we just, at that age, you're just like, well, maybe that's old age. And it becomes a lot more difficult to identify what the ailment is, because at that age, they could exhibit all sorts of those symptoms, and it's not necessarily anything you can do anything about anyway. But she was sleeping like 20, 22 hours a day and not eating. I'm just like, she's not going to live like this, not taking any fluid in. I called the doctor and he said, take her, call an ambulance right now. And she was taken to the hospital. They gave her antibiotics. And I mean, she had urinary tract infections before, but I could usually tell the symptoms. But this time it was just nothing I'd ever seen. And we were in the emergency room and she said, I heard her talking and praying. She said, Jesus, please forgive me for my sins. Please forgive me for all the people I've hurt. And then when she came out of it, she said, I was praying. I had a dream I was being buried, but then it stopped, and then she just woke up. And she said, I was asking Jesus for forgiveness, especially the people I hurt, especially you. She was pointing to me. So, yeah. She's a very temperamental woman, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions to my mother. But, we had our issues, but after Dad died, we took care of each other, and I grew to love her incredibly. I mean, the last 7 years of her life were some of the most wonderful times I ever had with my mother. And so they sent her home to die. They felt the damage to her body was just too severe, and she wasn't drinking. And I'm just like, Lord, she's not going to last 1 week if she can't drink. And because the damage to her nervous system was so severe. The church, I told the church, Mom's about to pass away. And my prayer group, there were like 20, 30 people came, surrounded her hospital bed in our house that the hospice care set up, and just prayed for her. And we read the scriptures, for this momentary light affliction is building for us an eternal weight of glory, far beyond all comparison. And the passage in Romans 8:28, Romans 8, really just the last several verses, how all things work for the good, neither height nor depth, neither life nor death, things present, things of the past, nor any other creature. I didn't quote that accurately, but that's what we did. And the prayer group was just weeping over her. And I remember I just like, Mom, you gotta drink something. And she wouldn't even wake up. But when I'd give her a straw, she didn't even have the strength to pull the fluid into her mouth. That's how weak she had become. And so even though the infection may have been cleared, she was just way too weak to, um, her body was so damaged she couldn't even drink. And I'm like, Lord, I don't think she's going to make it. I said, I have nothing to lose. I'm going to go to 7-Eleven, get one of those little tiny sippy straws, because maybe that'll work better. She was able to drink just a little bit. She'd wake up for a little bit, take one sip, just pass out. And I said, okay, I'm going to sit beside her and sleep near her bed on the floor, actually on the fireplace hearth. And that's also another miracle, because the mantle fell off like a year later. It could have crushed my head. But anyway,
wow.
Yeah, I think that was demonic. But we were all safe when that crashed. But anyway, I'm like, anytime she stirs, I'm going to try to give her a sip. And so like the first week I was giving her maybe not even 2 Dixie cups full a day of water, which is like nothing, 250 milliliters. And I was just praying. I said, Lord, this, I'm not going to forgive myself if I don't at least try. And she started to recover. And it felt like someone came back from the dead, because she was so motionless. But then each week she would have a little bit more strength. So this was in June. By mid-August, they took her out of hospice care. So she doesn't look like she's going to die. By about Thanksgiving, Christmas, this 2018, she was walking, talking, able to read and write. And sometimes I'd had to stop her because she'd be walking around the house. And I said this was of the Lord. And there are healthcare professionals in our family. They all said, yeah, this is a miracle. This is God's grace. And so I had her for 3 more years. She passed away at age 95. In fact,
wow.
Our last show together was on her 95th birthday. I'll never forget. I just looked at the dates. So
your last what together was 95th birthday?
Our show, when you came to my channel.
Oh, really?
Was actually on her 95th birthday. Yeah.
Wow. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's that is again just these little miracles, and I think that all of those prayers, it wasn't your prayers, and then you said other people were there praying, so many people were coming in there that I think God just looked down with mercy and said, okay, I'm gonna grant them a little more time.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. That's exactly how I feel. And God said, Lord, just a little more time. I'm not ready yet. Yeah. In fact, that was exactly what I said, Lord, just a little more time. I'm not ready yet.
Yeah, I love that. And it just, you're one of the things that you're saying that it makes me think about is a lot of times, sadly, people don't have that. And it's always one of those things where you never want to end. You never want to leave somebody on a bad note, a loved one or a friend or anybody like that, because we just don't know that if the person suddenly there's a car accident. I mean, there's so many ways that people can die. Yeah. And so there's always the cases where, hey, I didn't get to say I love this person, and I really do, and I didn't get to say it. And so the fact that you had these extra years is just beautiful.
Yeah, and even being there in the emergency room, because even though this is private, I guess it'd be a blessing for people to hear. My mom was terribly abused as a child, so she had a lot of emotional issues dealing with people, and it affected me. But they're lying in the emergency room when she was just saying, Jesus, forgive me for all the people I've hurt. I needed to hear that. I needed to.
Wow. It's
I needed
beautiful.
I needed the chance to tell her, I'm sorry I hurt her. And I think, whatever years I have left on the earth, it would have haunted me, would have affected me in my relationship with her. And so I didn't mean to come on your channel and just.
Oh no! Well, I asked you to bring up that story because I think that I think that's one of those things that can give people. I always look to give people hope, and I think that right now in these times that we're in, I think there's so many. I mean, here's one of the things, just to kind of segue a little bit away just for a second, is a lot of people right now. I keep reading about. Let me back up this, but I think with the pandemic, so many people had become very lonely last year, and so many people were separated from their family members and their loved ones. And just like us in my family too, we couldn't go back to South Florida to see my family so much because we were so worried about bringing them the coronavirus. And so we didn't want to risk their lives and all that kind of stuff. So we were just really happy when the vaccine came out. But still, one of the things that happened last year is one of the kids in my son's high school committed suicide. And he had been I taught him in Sunday school when he was in fifth grade, when my kids were in fifth grade. And this was he's a sophomore. And I saw the picture. My son brought it home with his yearbook, and he said, look at this insert. They put this insert with this kid in there and all of these cute pictures. And I'm like, wait a second, I know him. He was in the Sunday school. And he said, yeah, he was in our Sunday school class. And I thought, I mean, that just killed me. And he's not the only one in my neighborhood. There's we lived here so long now that I've seen several suicides. I know of friends, kids who've died of drug overdoses and all this kind of stuff. That's just these kids need hope and they need the light. And you've got these people who are swooping through social media, trying to take away people's hope and trying to cast doubts on people's religious beliefs and their beliefs in God. And it's not helping society. I think if we look at the stats right now and the suicide and the depression rates and all of the pills that are being given to people to get over their depression, the anxiety medicine, all that kind of stuff. We have to somehow get people back to God. And in our little ways, each of us are given some sort of a message that God can work through us.
Well, if I could, to that end, let me just share some scriptures. It says in Thessalonians, we do not grieve as those who have no hope. We do not grieve as those who have no hope. And someone on my channel, I don't know if you know Dr. Sandy Pigeon.
I don't.
Oh yeah, he called me. He called me like 5 minutes after I emailed, and he said, "Hey, listen up. Your mom's in a better place." And it's not like I didn't know that, but I was like, yeah, you're right. My short-term loss, my loneliness, that's the price. That's a small price to pay for my mom's immeasurable gain that she's safe. And as I've debated the atheists, I said, okay, what do you do in this situation? And to that end, since you had someone on your channel talking about Peter Boghossian and these street epistemologists, I don't know if it was brought up that Peter Boghossian's mother was passing away, and he gives the account that she was holding a crucifix in her hand, or probably a rosary or something.
No, I don't know about that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was in his book on a manual for creating atheists. And so he had a moment of really honest reflection, and he said he couldn't bring himself to remove it from her hand or try to talk her out of her beliefs. I said, yeah, isn't that amazing? When push comes to shove, Peter Boghossian, who wrote the manual for creating atheists, didn't have anything of comfort to offer his own mother at the time of her need. And I said, yeah, that's about the worth of what your atheism has. And he was a militant atheist. And Randolph Richardson, and I'm glad you followed some of the stuff he said, even though I disagree with his final conclusion, some of the things he said are brilliant. And one of those is that atheism has no answers. And so that picture of Peter Boghossian, like, can't bring himself to pull that crucifix or try to talk to his mother about her beliefs and talk her out of it. I'm just like, yeah, maybe you had a moment, Peter Boghossian, of having some sense. You realized at that point you have nothing to offer, that there are no answers in atheism. And that's exactly what has kept me in the faith, despite all the criticisms. I said, okay, so you guys, you atheists, and, I'm, especially some of the ones I'm on good terms, it's like, no offense, but you have nothing to offer. Isn't that right? There are no answers in atheism. If you assume that there's no God, it is a pure act of faith with absolutely no scientific evidence that you have to decide what's right and wrong and where there's meaning in life. Tell me what scientific experiment tells you what purpose your life is. and how you should live it. Absolutely nothing. And I knew a young man during the years I was witnessing at James Madison University as a volunteer. I'd be an engineer during the day. And once a week, I'd drive out to James Madison University from McLean, Virginia. And one young man, he was a student, philosophy student. He was saying, I don't have any reason for living. Couldn't find anything in philosophy. And he was an atheist that would tell him why he should keep living. So he went up to Richard Dawkins at a book signing in Charlottesville, Virginia, not too far away. And he straight up said, I'm thinking about killing myself. Why should I live? And Richard Dawkins, I'm getting this secondhand, but it's consistent with everything else Dawkins has said. Dawkins said, well, you have to make up your own meaning. Right. Yeah. I'm like, okay, so you're going to insist on 100% proof of God, and yet you're just going to make up your own meaning with zero evidence. I said,
yeah.
Don't you see the incredible double standards here? You're making fun of people because they believe in something and they don't have 100% evidence, and yet your atheism is forcing you to adopt faith beliefs and things you have zero evidence for. It's not like the Christians have zero evidence of God. I mean, we do have the historical archaeological record in the modern day. We have the evidence from biology that life was intelligently designed, despite what evolutionary biologists will say. And even the physicists are acknowledging that there is something up that's outside of our universe that's causing fine tuning. It's getting so bad they have to invoke multiple universes which they can't see, test, or verify. Isn't that kind of amazing? So I was just, I don't know how I got on that. Yeah, we were talking about mothers passing away, and
but that's so true though. That it's you brought up a bunch of good points, but one of them is, why do we have? I mean, the atheists can only answer the how. And they don't even know a lot of the how. How did we get here? They don't know a lot of the how, but that's what they can attempt to answer with science. But they can't answer the why. Why are we here? Why do we sense that we have this special purpose, this meaning? Why do we intrinsically value humans? Why do we value the truth? Why do we reason? All of these things come together, and you have to say, we're not just random splats on a planet, the third rock from the sun in some random galaxy. There's something special about us that you have to admit.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the Bible, the more that I've thought about it, I said, it's amazing how accurate the Bible describes the human condition. We see a world that is beautiful, created, and intelligently designed, but also simultaneously cursed and in need of a savior. And I said, that's exactly the gospel message. If you just think about it, because you see that there are things in the world that point to something greater, but then you also feel the curse. You really do feel the curse and the sting of death. And we're looking for a cure for that sting of death. Peter Boghossian, in his account, it's like, oh my, I'm just putting words in his mouth, and at this point, I'm just saying, he realized, I don't have a cure for the sting of death. But the Christian message offers a cure. And there's evidence. The more important thing is the message has evidence that backs it up.
Yeah. And, you're saying something, and I was just thinking something this morning about Christianity and how it's different from these other faiths. And I think about, okay, number one, we've got a Bible that's written by over 40 authors, 66 books, over 1,500 years in 3 languages, over 3 continents, and it's extremely coherent given all of that. And the other thing is it's not just Jesus who was performing miracles and who initiated this whole movement. Just like when we go to Islam, it's Muhammad who did everything, and Muhammad did the legwork. And if we go to the Mormon faith, you've got Joseph Smith doing all the legwork. But in Christianity, there's all these people. There's a lot of people involved, and multiple people were doing miracles. Paul was doing miracles. Peter was doing miracles. The other disciples had the power to do some miracles. And so we see all of this stuff, multiple testimonies. There's so many things about Christianity besides just Jesus himself. I mean, no other faith has anyone like Jesus who can completely explain the fact that we're all bearing crosses. It's really
Yes.
amazing. And I feel like I used to think it was just when I grew up, I thought it was just the default and it was boring and there were more exotic faiths elsewhere. And then I looked at them and I realized, no, those are boring. And those are based on one man's like Buddha's ideas, which are good ideas. Life is suffering. Yeah, that's true. But everything's based on Buddha, or it's based on, and I'm not sure, I don't know much about the Vedas and how those were put together, but these other faiths seem to be based on usually the ideas of one person or just a couple of people, not based on this huge community of people.
And that's the witness. That's part of the witness, because in the ultimate sense, it's all based on Jesus Christ, but it's his work in people's lives over time and over wide geographical regions. And it's even happening today. Why is it that in China, in Iran, and in Africa, places where there's persecution, the faith is flourishing? And I'm like, this isn't a marketing campaign. It's not because it's succeeding because of some clever marketing campaign. It's this succeeding despite all the pressures. And I'm hearing of accounts of the Lord working miracles. And of course, the atheists, they'll say, well, I haven't seen one. And someone on your channel commented and said, well, if God works a miracle for someone and not someone else, then he's unjust. The implication is that he's not going to believe. And I'm like, okay, so all I could say is if it says in Hebrews and other places, if you hear his voice, don't harden your heart. So if God extends grace to you someday, are you going to complain that he's being unjust to you? That's kind of how I would respond to that. The other thing is, how do you know on what basis, if you're an atheist, that you know that this is unjust? You're setting up yourself as someone who's the arbiter of what's right and wrong. There's a little contradiction in that.
Yeah.
But there's one thing that last night I had a 4.5-hour monologue. I just kind of shared everything about my journey to apologetics, and I see some parallels to you. It's like, you're a professor of business. How did you get involved in all of this? And I was like an engineer in the aerospace and defense industry. How did I get involved in all of this? And I was kind of laughing. I said, I didn't have any formal biology training until I was age 53. And I'm just like, how did I get hooked into this? And by the way, now I'm actually publishing in biology journals. But how did this happen? And so it's like, yeah, well, the Lord will move in people's lives. And it's like, this isn't what I signed up for, Lord. It's like, well, that doesn't matter. You're not the one who decides. So,
look at Paul. Look at Saul. What did he sign up for? He's busy murdering Christians and doing. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, God has a plan for you. That's what Ananias told him. God has a plan for you. Saul didn't really have a choice in the matter. It was kind of like, if God has a plan for you, you're not going to want to go against it. Like Jesus said, stop kicking the goat or whatever he said.
Yeah. And so I was just sharing last night that I was really struggling with a lot of things in my faith. And I said, okay, I'm an engineer. You're trained to be skeptical. Engineers, that's a quality that's important. You're skeptical first of yourself because you make mistakes. And you tend to believe things you can repeat and control and understand. And the Christian faith is putting your trust in something you can't repeat on demand. Like I can flick a light switch, turn it on and off. And it's like, yeah, I can trust that it's going to do its job, but that trust only goes so far because it's not going to give me salvation and cure my deepest needs. But yet, yeah, I can control it, understand it, and repeat. And then in a sense, you can believe it's real and true, but the Christian faith is not like that. We can't run experiments and tell God to show up on demand, because at that point you're God yourself. And I realized that was really the source of my doubts and my struggles. Then I nearly walked out, but then I read John Polkinghorne's Gifford Lectures. He was a quantum particle physicist, then became an ordained minister. And I said, that's exactly the guy I need to look up. I need to know why a scientist of his caliber believes in Jesus Christ and the miracles he worked. And his book was almost totally unreadable, but I got two messages from it. One, that a religion that is just based on wishful thinking is like the ultimate atheism. It's not real. What counts is that the faith is real. It's grounded in something real. And he said Christianity is different than any other religion because it makes bold historical claims. It makes bold historical claims. Obviously, the first being Jesus' resurrection. But even aside from that, it's like, is Paul real? Is Peter real? How about the church fathers? How about the names of the kings in the Old Testament of Israel and Judah? How about Nehemiah and Ezra? And as I was looking at all these, I said, this is really kind of hard to run away from, because if the Bible is so accurate about identifying names, places, and events, natural events, it kind of like, well, you start to feel like, well, maybe it's accurate when it talks about supernatural events. And that's something I can't run away from.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things. There's two things about that just that come to my mind. One is you have somebody, I think his name was Sir William Ramsay, and he was in the late 1800s, and he was an archaeologist. He went over to the ancient Near East and he wanted to debunk the Bible because he didn't believe it. And he wanted to see if what was in the Bible was historical. And after going through everything really carefully, he really came to appreciate Luke as a really excellent historian, and he converted to Christianity.
Yes. Yes. The facts scream. And it's a little bit heartbreaking that a lot of church leadership is uncomfortable with these sorts of discussions. It's outside of their quote unquote business model. So it's really left to people like us on the fringes in cyberspace and then in the publishing materials to argue for Christianity, because the church leadership and a lot of congregations are actually, and some people have told me, they're uncomfortable with facts because they're afraid that it's going to overturn their faith if they start to ask. And it's like,
but it's the opposite. That's the thing. I was curious too when I was coming back to Jesus. I remember this atheist saying, I want to challenge you. You read the biggest, most he said, I'll read your best work from a Christian and you read my best work from an atheist. I said, okay. So I read Bertrand Russell that he told me to read, Why I'm a Christian or Why I'm Not a Christian. And he read Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And because that at the time was my best that I could give him. And I still love C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity, but anyway, that didn't do anything for him. And I read Bertrand Russell, and I'm thinking, that is awful. If this is the best they have, we are good. we could have made. And so I just wanted to point out one other fact about the history that you mentioned, that Peter Williams, who's out of England, I forget exactly where he is in England, which university, but he's a university professor. He does study this stuff. And one of the things that he did is he went into the New Testament and he realized that a lot of the names in the New Testament, you don't just have the major players, like the major characters like Peter and Paul and those people. You have all kinds of minor characters named, lots and lots of minor characters like Paulos and people like that who are just Lydia and just a bunch of minor characters. And he said that one of the reasons that we have support for this as being more historical and the Gnostics not is because the Gnostics only list the major players, because our memory, that's how it works. When we have encounters with people, if I go back 50 years into my grade school times, I go back 40, 50 years, and I start thinking back to my friends in classrooms and things like that. I couldn't tell you the names of all the minor ones that I don't really remember. I definitely remember my best friends and a couple other people in these classes, but I couldn't name all the minor people. And so I think the same thing is with the Gospels and stuff. They have all these minor people because it's really pretty recent to when it was made, versus the Gnostics, which again is Peter and Paul and just the major characters.
Oh, wow. Yes. Yes. Amazing. And there are all these little things. And that was one thing that J. Warner Wallace he would pick up on things like that he had so much experience as a murder detective, identifying liars and truth tellers. He said there's just a certain quality of what truth tellers will say in their accounts. And even in my untrained eye, I could see that, because I've read like my dad's diary, and I'm just like, yeah, this doesn't read like a novel. It doesn't read like something that was written to entertain you. It is like someone just pouring out their heart when they happen to have time, and they would list down fragmented, disconnected facts, things that just like, well, why is that in there? You know, like that has the ring of truth. I mean, little things like when John and Peter were running toward the tomb, and John says, yeah, I outran him. Just like, yeah, that's kind of like a fact that it's like, that wasn't a very nice thing to say, that Peter's slower than you or something like that, or you were more eager to reach the tomb. But it's like, it's almost like not nice, and it doesn't fit like a nice story.
But it's also kind of funny because I could picture if my two sons were racing each other to get to the tomb, and one of them outran the other one, he would definitely put down in there, and I outran him.
Right. Right. You see, that tells you this is from the perspective of the guy writing it. There are little things like that J. Warner Wallace, being a murder detective, would pick up. And there was some minor debate on, well, one account said the robe was scarlet, and another account said it's red. And I'm like, there was this big internet thing. If you Googled the dress, there's a Wikipedia entry on the dress. And I was like, I wasn't sure if I could just Google it and it would find it, but there's so much controversy. And I showed this picture on my channel, and I said, it looks gold and white to me. Half of the people in the side chat said, no, it's blue and black. And I said, yeah, that was exactly the issue, is we perceive colors differently. And
the other thing is, Sal, on the color of whether it's scarlet or it's purple, there's also the assumption that it has to be solid. Like, who said it has to be solid? They didn't say it's solid one color purple or solid one color scarlet. It could easily be some sort of a mixture, blend. Yeah.
But
the way dye is.
Exactly. But I said, yeah, that's really interesting, because now that we know that people can perceive colors differently, and the shades could be close enough that someone would call it red or purple. Because one time I was shopping with a lady friend, and she was looking for clothes for me. I said, that color is orange. She said, no, that's coral. So but there. Yeah.
Well, even look at Stephen Rivard. I don't know if you can see the chat, but look at Stephen Rivard. I'm putting him in here. See that little S on the left of Stephen Rivard? That color right there. Like, what color is that? Sorry, Stephen, to call out your name, but I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I'd say kind of purpley, but it looks like a purplish red. I mean.
Exactly.
There you go. But this may seem like minutia, but someone said magenta. Now that one's interesting, but some people say, well, that's not enough to convince me. And it's like, well, you're not convincing me of atheism. And I mean, I totally, I get that people would want more information, but we live our lives with less information than we'd like for so many decisions in life. This is no different. And I say some information is better than zero, infinitely better, because atheism has no answers. It has nothing. I've yet to meet an atheist that say, okay, atheism is defined as lack of belief in God. Therefore, this is what's right. This is what's wrong. This is you can't, every statement you'll make with your premise that I lack belief in God will lead to all sorts of non sequiturs. And I'm just like, that's exactly the problem. Yeah, the atheists have nothing. The other religions, they don't have a historical record. they don't make bold claims about history.
That's true.
And, yeah. And really, probably one thing that's really important is just what Jesus does in each individual life. And
That,
there are people
well, even,
on my channel that have experienced
yeah.
God's work in their hearts. I mean,
yeah, I mean, how did somebody like me, I mean, seriously, how did this happen? Because I wasn't, I mean, even going back, let's say going back 15 years. 15 years ago, I was floundering around, making fun of people to my kids, even not with actually 15 years. Let me think here. More like, say, 12 years ago, 13, something like that. I remember, hey, look at, we can go to the big pool on Sunday because nobody's there. They're all at church. Ha ha ha. It's just all these things that I would do. I was just, and I would make, because I did not like the church. I didn't want to go to the church. And then my son started saying, why aren't we going to church, Mom? Everybody else is going to church. What's wrong with us? I'm like, oh gosh. So I decided we better go. And I started having experiences right around that time. And so this whole, like, it was like a confluence of all of these amazing spiritual events. And then my son coming in and saying, come on, Mom, lighten up. Like, literally and figuratively and everything else. So
yeah. And it's like, I haven't heard many atheists come to me and say, my life became so much more wonderful. I had more meaning and purpose. Things made sense ever since I became an atheist. Why don't you become one too? You'll be,
Mm-hmm.
And I asked Matt Dillahunty straight out. I said, what does atheism have? Okay, just speak to the Christian audience here. We're on Modern Day Debate. Tell them what atheism has to offer them.
Mm-hmm.
I need to re-listen to that because I really wasn't, cause in a debate, you're just so distracted. But I remember, the only thing I remember, he said, it'll give you freedom.
Yeah.
And then he also said in the debate that he can't prove anything with 100% certainty. And I wanted to say, okay, so why don't we just subject what you just said, that atheism will give you freedom? You can't prove it. You just admitted you can't prove your own statements.
Mm-hmm.
You have to accept them by faith. Well done, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah. I stopped. He had a debate just a couple of days ago with somebody. I'm forgetting the guy's name for some reason, but he just had a debate on Modern Day Debate. And a couple of my friends on Twitter said they were watching it. And so but I'm not, it's just with Matt, I feel like a lot of his whole debate center around this idea of I'm not convinced and you need to convince me. And he's never convinced. You can't convince the guy who doesn't want to be convinced.
You see, I should have done more of what I just said. Tell me what you have to offer. Because when he's saying, I'm not convinced, he's setting himself up as the final judge of reality. And he took offense when I called him on it. I said, you're not the final arbiter of what decides what's reasonable. He flipped out. He was livid. I mean, and it's like, yeah, you don't like being called on it because you're used to acting like you decide what's right and wrong, and you don't. And I'm not here to try to persuade you. Boy, he took offense to that. I called him on it.
Here's what I think is going to happen to him. Now, apparently his mom is a Christian, and his mom has told them that she's actually experienced demons or seen a demon, and that she also has told him that Christianity is absolutely true. She says it to him a bunch of times. And he's said in different shows that his mom does this. His mom has told him she's a very strong Christian, all this stuff. And so I think that's what's going to happen. Maybe it won't happen for 10 years, maybe even 20 years, maybe even 30 years. But one day Matt is going to wake up and Jesus is going to speak to him, and Matt's going to be like, oh, my mom was right. So I think that, I don't know. I feel like if you have a mom like that.
Yeah. Well, there was someone who was a member of the atheist organization in Kenya. And then he said, I had to resign. I don't know if you heard that story.
Oh, wait, I did hear something like that. What exactly happened? Because I feel like I heard whispers of that.
Yeah, this was big news in Kenya. They had an atheist organization, and then one of the founding officers said, I resigned because I found Jesus. And he said, I can't serve anymore. And it was really uncomfortable. You could tell it was probably uncomfortable for the remaining leadership to say, well, we'd like to thank Mr. So-and-so for his service to our organization. We wish him the best. Okay, wow. That was the official letter. Maybe a week later, then the same guy who wrote that nice farewell letter starts mocking him on Twitter. I'm just like, yeah, that's just the way business is now. You say one thing in an official letter, and then you tweet what you really feel.
Yeah, that is so Twitter. But you know what? I feel like, I mean, one of the things is the Pew polls have talked about atheist retention rates, and it's the lowest of all religions. I don't know, they don't call themselves a religion, but it's only 30% retention. So there's a really good chance these guys, towards the end of life, when they start pondering their purpose and their existence and what really matters and what meaning is, they'll come back to Jesus. I think that Jesus is going to open a lot of their eyes.
Well, I think, the Lord calls people back. And sadly, I think the reason we have so many nuns is part of it, not the whole story, is the churches have failed them.
Mm-hmm.
I often think that some of these churches are really powerful atheist factories. If you wanted to make an atheist, send them to some of these congregations. They'll do a good job of preparing you to be an atheist once you leave the home. I just see that.
I can see, Sal, I see your point. Now, I just want to highlight that. Now, my church, it took me a while to find this particular church. I looked around. I went to different congregations, different faith sects. I went to different groups, and I found this one that I feel like they are consistent with the Bible. They dig into it. They have an amazing message each week, and it just blows me away. And they're really we're growing. Like, we're one of the few growing churches. But I know what you're talking about, because I've seen those people. They're coming from a place where the people are telling them, you're going to hell, you're a sinner, you're awful, you're just a terrible person, and there's nothing left for you, and you've done this and you did that, you're working in the devil's work. I mean, you see that kind of stuff in the Deep South a lot of times, but then you also see the leaders themselves are doing things like one of the things about the Catholic Church, and I was raised a Catholic, so I'm not trying to disparage them, but these leaders, they don't sometimes live up to God in the way that they should. There's lots of examples, and that is what's destroyed them.
Yeah. And, I have been praying I've been thinking, how is it that faith is built? And I'm actually in the middle of, I started actually trying to commit to writing the last week of my mother's life here on earth.
Oh.
When I was in her hospital room, that death when she died was moderately unexpected, meaning I thought she was going to recover again, like in 2018, and they brought her home and she just died while I was examining her with a stethoscope. I was right there.
Wow.
But earlier that week I said, all right, Lord, while I'm sitting here in the hospital room just trying to be with her, and I said, well, I'll try to kill time by writing the book Cures for Doubting Thomas. And the thesis of my book is true faith comes about by prayer of other people. And the example was in the Last Supper. Simon was talking about how he's not going to deny the Lord, and the Lord tells him, no one, you're going to deny me 3 times after the cock crows. And Jesus said, Simon, Satan has demanded that you be sifted like wheat. I'm praying for you that your faith may not fail. And I said, we think of all the times that Jesus prayed for something and it happened. What a powerful prayer that he's praying that one of his beloved apostles, their faith wouldn't fail. I'm praying for you that I'm like, I don't think faith is something you can just we don't write manuals on how to believe. It's like, boy, I just persuaded myself that I believe in God. I don't think that is true faith. True faith is an answer to the prayer. I've been praying. I prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And so when I was going through doubt, I figured out that it says in James that if you're doubting, don't expect that God will hear your prayer. I'm just like, well, Lord, this is kind of tough because I need faith. And you're saying, if you're doubting, Slam RN, yeah. Thank you for your sympathy, Slam. My mother passed away 7 weeks ago. I left a tribute for her on my channel. You'll see it, Esther Cordova, 1926 to 2021. So, praying that it said, don't expect your prayers to be answered. I'm just like, Lord, that's really tough, because the thing I need, I don't have. And if I'm doubting, then why should I expect you to answer my prayers? I said, I'm in a real past. I'm in a real tough strait here. This is catch-22. But then later on in James, it says, confess your faults to one another so that you may be healed. The effectual fervent prayers of a righteous man availeth much. And I was like, that's the answer. God may not listen to me, but he's going to listen to righteous people praying for me. And so I went to my prayer group and said, I don't have it. I'd like to believe in Christianity. I just don't have it in me anymore. And again, that's my skeptical scientific engineer mentality. Just speaking, I said, I know there are no answers in atheism, but I can't believe. I'm kind of in that boat of like, well, if the dead are not raised, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. And that's kind of where I was like, I'd like to live my life a little better than just living for eating and drinking.
Yeah.
That's not a good existence. And
no.
And so
let me ask you this, because I see this question from Great Commission, and I'm actually not sure how to answer it at all, because I've never heard anything quite like this. So it says, what do you think of the hypothesis that Eve being taken out of Adam to start a human family is a finite image of a grand eternal truth from the triune Yahweh? I'm not sure if you know how to answer it either.
I've never thought of it, and
maybe it's the family idea. So you've got Adam,
yeah.
Eve, and then the children, something like that.
I'm reluctant to extend too many things except just plain readings. That's just where I am. Also in my faith, and they ask what theology I have. It's like, I used to say, well, I identified kind of as a Calvinist, but like, no, I don't do that anymore. It's like, you don't see Calvin's name in the Bible. So what I'll use is like, okay, any word that you see in the Bible that is spoken of favorably, is good doctrine, I'll use that. So if the Bible uses the word elect or predestination, I'll use that. And if it uses the word free will, I'll use that. So, okay, that's where I am. And so I know that's kind of I'm sorry, I'm not giving a substantive response. I wouldn't feel comfortable using that. That's just my personal thing. There's so many things that are just straight in the Bible that are so clear that I feel more comfortable with that. So
I agree with you, because I don't see, the thing is for me is I feel like, Calvinism, people can make arguments, they pull certain verses out, then people pull arguments for Molinism. I tend to lean more towards the Molinist view, but I think one day we're going to get in front of God and he's going to not say, are you Calvinist or Molinist or what? I didn't really appreciate that you thought that way. I think he's going to say, and you love Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so exactly that's where I said, of late I said, I'm not going to identify with people outside of the Bible or words. I'm going to try to I'm going to be a minimalist. I said, okay, whatever words have been in the Bible, that will be what I'll identify. Say, what do you believe about predestination? I say, well, it's written in the Bible. I accept it. I don't understand it. I'll accept it.
Yeah,
that's about as far as it goes. I'm not going to defend someone else's characterization of it. That's just like, that's like unhelpful. We need to try to understand what God's trying to communicate to us. And since I don't see Calvinism written by that name explicitly in the Bible, I don't know that there's great benefit in trying to talk about it. So, but there was something we were, I'm having a Joe Biden moment here. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought.
A Joe Biden moment. I think we've been, I can go for probably about 7 more minutes, I think, because then I've got at 1:45, I've got to take my son so I got to go make sure he's ready and stuff like that. So got to take him to his basketball practice tonight. Oh,
that's great. Yeah. I was talking about faith. And so I was before that group, and it does say in Jude, be merciful to those who doubt. And so if I just my advice, and really it's Scripture's command, be merciful to those to doubt. But if you're the doubter, my advice is, if you encounter people that are not merciful to you, they're not going to be helpful. Maybe you're best to go find someone else, because if you're just being condemned for your doubts, that's not what the Bible teaches. That's telling me that the person who's condemning you isn't following God himself and doesn't know his Bible, because you don't treat doubters that way. There's a difference between someone who's a scoffer and who's a doubting Thomas. You could see Jesus treats doubting Thomas very differently than he does others who are just, bent on trying to find ways to disbelieve. Thomas wasn't like that. And Jesus saw Thomas's heart and he said, "Here I am." And so this group didn't try to argue. The leader of the group said something simple, and the others concurred. They said, "We love you, Sal, be with us. We love you, Sal, be with us." And so they invited me to keep coming to the prayer meeting, and they knew I was struggling. I wouldn't say much. And that was 2 years that they were praying for me. And part of the process of healing was me getting involved in studying evidence, reasons, science, and archaeology, and personal testimony. And that was my road to healing and returning to the Christian faith. But I don't believe it was because I learned. I don't believe specifically it was because of the information. I think this is a providential act of God and him starting to encourage me. Because you could throw facts at people and won't necessarily make them believe. In fact, it says in Proverbs, you correct a fool, he'll hate you. So, sometimes the truth has a very negative effect on someone that has a hardened heart, and, God softened my heart. So that's what I would say for Christians that are wanting to believe. It's the prayers of others that will really help you along.
I agree with you. Sal, one of the things that I found in my little travels is there's all different kinds of atheists or doubters. And so there's a certain subgroup that is the type that I think at one point you might have found yourself in this doubters camp. Is something happened in your life that just made you question God's desire for you and desire for your life and pain. I should put it that way. So sometimes people come into, they have themselves a disease or a lot of physical pain. I've talked to a lot of atheists on Twitter who are honestly in pain all the time. They're physically in pain all the time. They're always taking medications that still don't even help them that much. And so there's that, or they lost a loved one they truly cherished. And there's even people losing their kids, losing a son or a daughter. I mean, I can't even imagine. And so they say to themselves, how could God do this? He must not, either he's not listening, or he isn't here. He's not a truly loving God. I mean, people have all of these questions. And so those are the ones I feel that there's the most, number one, there's the most hope for. And number two, you can't, just like you said, you have to be very gentle, even though I'm sure in my past someone could dig up stuff where they say, you weren't very gentle here, but you have to be gentle as much as you possibly can. And so.
Oh, amen. Amen. That's why, even though someone's kind of nasty to me in a discussion, it's like, okay, there are people on the side that are wanting me to really address them rather than kind of my obnoxious opponent in a debate stage. And I try to identify. I said, because I've been there. I nearly left the faith because my dad was dying and I was praying to God and he didn't get healed. It's like, it would have been nice, Lord, if you at least just gave me an audible and said, well, Sal, I love you and your dad, but I'm taking him home. It's like, if he had done something like that, I said, this would have been easy to believe. But God, by design, doesn't make the path to faith easy. The road is narrow.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it? The door is narrow.
Look for the narrow gate.
Go through the narrow gate. And it's like, and faith is a work. They asked, how do you work the works of God? And Jesus said, to believe. And just like, that's easy, right? And it's like, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and like kind of like also to say, a lot of people think they can. One of the other things that distinguishes Christianity, just to quickly bring this up, is we can't earn our way to heaven. Unlike all of these other faiths, that it's a works-based faith, where like in the Muslim faith, God's keeping track. Here you did 3 good things today and 2 bad things. Okay, you're looking good today, but tomorrow, who knows? But but the thing about Christianity is it's fully God's grace. God's providence, God's everything is, and someone to say everything's in God's court, but it's also your heart and keeping your heart open, and just to say, okay, God, I repent. I'm there for you. Just open my eyes in some way, just to be that humble person who says, I'm ready to hear it now. So if you just open my eyes.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you for having me on. It's a delight, and sorry it's been so long since we've talked, but Lord willing, we'll run into each other again.
Yeah, thank you. So Sal, before we go, are you working on anything, or you got any debates coming up or anything like that we can share with others?
I had the debate that never was. A regular visitor, Digital Gnosis, suggested a debate, and then the negotiations broke down. And then so we just made our team, the topic was, is DNA evidence of God? Our team had decided to go ahead and just say what our case was. But then we were joined by 3 PhD scientists. So my partner was a PhD from MIT and Harvard, 140 patents, millions of people had their medical devices implanted in them. He specializes in cardiac type things.
Wow.
He's a biomedical engineer, MIT and Harvard PhD in biomedical engineering. He was my debate partner. And we were going to debate Digital Gnosis, who shows up here. And when they found out, this gentleman, his name's Rob Stadler, when Digital Gnosis found out, Converse Contender said, well, yeah, they backed out once they heard Rob Stadler was going to be on the first team instead of John Maddox. And then I had Cy Gart, who's a professor of biochemistry, and James Carter is professor of organic chemistry. Ryan Hayes, who's a professor of chemistry and nanomolecular science.
That's a good team.
That was brain powered team. So if you look on my channel, let's see if I can, I don't know if I can grab it. If you'll give me just 1 minute, I'll grab the link and I'll dump it into the side chat.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to everybody in the audience. I love seeing all you guys. I see Impressive, and I saw Susan earlier. Hate, Love, Nothing's been here for a while. Antitheist. So we do have someone who's an anti-theist, and we've had a couple of other doubters who were in here earlier. I'm trying to go through here and catch the names. Josh Howard, thank you so much. Josh said we're dressed professionally. Hate, Love, Nothing. Cheryl was in here for a little while there. Great Commission. That we also had Veckel, who stopped in real briefly, and so just welcome everybody. Plastic Jesus. So we had a lot of great people in here. So thank you guys for coming in. Please come back. I'm going to start trying to do more often videos. I slowed down a little bit because I've been teaching a class, 2 classes right now in this 6-week summer term, but I'm coming to the end of that. And so I should be freeing up some time. So Sal, did you share? Oh yeah, you got to share. Okay, good.
That's one. And then I had the debate with James Downard, and people have said that was also a very good performance on my part. Oh, by the way, I was recently voted the #1 YouTube creationist by evolutionist YouTubers. They said the content and scientific level, the engagement, the way I conduct myself, they said, yeah, Sal's #1. So I know that's quite a bit of self-promotion there, but I'm going to drop one more link, and then thank you for your time, SJ. So almost
thank
there.
You.
If I could just reach there. Okay.
So I know all those people that you mentioned, like I know John Maddox, of course, he's been on my channel. RJ Downard has not been on my channel, but I'm very familiar with him because he does a lot with Jackson Wade. I think they even wrote a book together. So
yeah, and so I debated him, and people said I pretty much ran over him on that one. It was a very civil debate. You know me, I'm not, wasn't.
Oh yeah.
Combated, but the technical stuff, people rated that debate very good. And then after that, we had that one with a panel of 4 PhD scientists. I was the dumb kid on the block. I have 5 science degrees. I was the dumb kid on the block. in that stream, and people were like, "Yeah, there's a lot of brain power in that stream today."
Oh, no kidding.
We were arguing, defending God on science, and just like, yeah, we made a statement that just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you can't do great science, and that was, I'd say that was probably one of the best streams on my channel. So thank you for inviting me to do a little promo.
Oh,
And,
thank you.
Yeah, God
So you guys
bless
please go over
everyone
to
here.
go to Sal's channel, Evidence and Reasons, and I want to say thank you for coming on, Sal. You made it much more fun today. It was going to be boring with just me. So thank you. You guys have a great one. I've got to go I got to bring my son to basketball right now. And happy Father's Day, everybody.
Happy Father's Day.
So you guys, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, do it all in the glory of God. Thank you.